Chavre, how are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilich, begashmis beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. Happy Chanukah, freiliche Chanukah. Today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Mikeitz, Shabbos Chanukah, and as usual, we have to discuss the connections between Parshas Mikeitz and Chanukah and what lessons there are for us. First, since the war started, we started with charity every year. We're giving tzedakah now. There should be peace in the world. Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Israel should be victorious. A Mashiach now. Then we say a pasuk. We go to a prayer. Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chasadim. We're always meant to connect these three things together. And this pasuk is a famous pasuk in Tehillim, Kapitel Pei, pasuk Beis. Roye Yisrael Hazino, Noe Katzoin Yosef, Yoshev Akruvim Meifiyom. Listen, shepherd of Israel, who leads Yosef like sheep, appear you who are enthroned upon the cheruvim. So over here in this pasuk, Hashem is called the one who is Noyeg, who leads Katzoin Yosef, Yosef like sheep, and the entire Jewish nation is called Yosef. So Hashem is the shepherd, and the entire Jewish nation is called Yosef. And as explained in Chassidus, is because Yosef is the one who was the provider and sustained us throughout the years of the famine, as explained in this week's Parsha. So therefore, forever we get certain powers and strength from Yosef, and empowerment to be able to live in a hostile environment in a foreign country and still raise good Jews. Ephraim and Menashe, like this week's Parsha speaks about the birth of Ephraim and Menashe, etc. So therefore, forever, we're always getting that empowerment to be able to be faithful to our tradition and heritage and whatever we are, our identity, even wherever we are, no matter what, that we get from Yosef. So that's why we're called Yosef forever. So, in this week's Parsha is the story how Yosef gets out of prison and he interprets Paro's dreams and about the 7 years of famine and the 7 years of abundance. And then Yaakov has to send his children to Egypt, and Yosef accuses them of being spies. He makes them go back to get Binyamin because they said that they have a brother. So in order to prove whether they're spies or not, first you have to prove that what you told Yosef that you have a brother, is that true? Bring your brother here. So see the parsha. Now when Binyamin comes to Yosef, the pasuk says that Vaymar Yosef ki nichmeru rachmav. Yosef rushed because compassion for his brother had been stirred. Vayevakesh livkois, and he wanted to weep. Vayovei hachedra vayev shama. So he went into the room and he wept there. He had to leave the room where all his brothers were, and he started crying. And then it says, he washed his face, went back out, and restrained himself and said, set out bread. So the question over here is, and I'm saying a Rashi Sikha of the Rebbe in Chelik Tes Vav Mikeitz Beis. We're soon going to read some part in it. So the question is, this is a very unusual expression that Vayimar Yosef ki nichmeru rachmav. His compassion was stirred. Why don't you just say he had compassion? What does it mean his compassion was stirred? And it says El Ochiv, from seeing his brother. Why is it only about his brother, Binyamin, not in general because of his brothers? And then Rashi over here brings a whole story that Kinichmenu Rachmav, his compassion being stirred. Why? Because he asked Binyamin, do you have any brothers? And Binyamin says, I had a brother, but now we don't know where he is. And then Yosef asked Binyamin, do you have sons? And he says, Yeshli Asara, I have 10 sons. Omaloi Mashmam, what are the names of the sons? Omaloi, he said, Bela Vecha V'Goymer, And then Binyamin explained to Yosef how every single one of his sons, 10 sons, every one of the names is related to Yosef. What happened to Yosef? The tragedy. For example, he said, Kulam al Shem Achi, they're all because of my brother. They allude to my brother. Vatsaros, Hashem Matza'u, and the troubles that encountered him. The name Bela, Shenivla Beinu Umeis, he was swallowed up among the nations. Becher, Shahir B'cher Lima, because he was the B'cher. And so on and so forth. See Rashi over here. And then Rashi, after he says over this, after he says that this story from the Medrash, he says, Nichmeru, what does it mean being stern? Nischamamu, had been heated. Ubeloshem Mishnah, ala koimer shel zeisim. It refers to the koimer of olives. And what is that? A vessel in which olives were placed so they should become softened by heating, thus facilitating the production of oil. So this is going to be the focus of what I'm going to speak today, and the connection between Parshas Mikeitz and Chanukah, which I never thought about before, and that is the warmth of the flames. And what is the uniqueness over here? What profound lesson does this pasuk teach us in our interpersonal relationships on the most fundamental level and relevance? So let me tell you what stirred me in the first place. I saw a video this week where somebody from Australia goes by the Rebbe right before Chanukah or something, and Chanukah comes up that they're going to be in Australia for Chanukah. And the Rebbe says, it's summer over there, no? And the guy says, yes. So then the Rebbe gives him $1, and he gives him a bracha for a zumedike Chanukah. For a summery summer. Zumah means summer. Zumedike means a summer-like Chanukah. So this really, really was very interesting to me, because I always thought about it. Being in Australia, the Chanukah is different than the Chanukah in America. In America, you light the licht. It's 4:20 p.m., 4:30 p.m. It gets dark early. It's the winter outside. And all the ideas of, taking ice and transforming it, bringing light into the darkness, fine. But over here, we light the Chanukah menorah like 8:30. It's late in the day, it doesn't turn dark till later, and it's hot outside. And over here, the Rebbe is giving a blessing. You should have a Zumedik Chanukah, meaning to say there is a positive point to it. That's why it's a blessing. By the Rebbe, there's no just words that he's saying, because you're going to be in the summer, therefore you should have a summery Chanukah. It means, and I believe that this is the message that we should focus. Sometimes you have to focus that the warmth has to melt the ice. Sometimes you have to focus on the idea of the warmth. Think about the flames and the warmth of the flames, and that in a place like Australia, it's the warmth from the outside that adds to the intensity of the experience of the warmth. So the main lesson and the focus should be on the warmth. So what does that mean? And from this Rashi, from this pasuk, I understood something new also. What does it mean that the pasuk says? Okay, so first of all, let's just say what the Rebbe says in the first part of the Sikha. The Rebbe asks a question that what's Rashi going to all the details over here with the story with Binyamin is because Rashi is bothered that Yosef kept his control till then. When he met the brothers in the first time, for someone to control himself, you have to have nerves of steel, an iron resolve. And he was like that the whole time before. And now he sees Binyamin, and all of a sudden he should want to weep. So this is the question that the Rebbe said is bothering a person learning the pasuk. So therefore, he has to explain this medrash that what happened over here was an intensely emotional experience. Something was tremendously moving. And that is when Yosef sees such an expression of loyalty by his brother, to the degree that he named all of his 10 children for the pain and the problems and the troubles that Yosef has experienced. So it's like touching a raw wound. But wait, there's more. Not only once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, 8 times, 9 times, 10 times. Yosef couldn't control himself anymore. Therefore, Rashi has to bring out this event, because this event brings out how enormous the experience was emotionally. And that's why that stirred. Stirred means it wouldn't have happened otherwise. Some translations, Nichmeru Rachmav, his Rachmav, his mercies, his compassion was stirred. Otherwise it wouldn't have happened. Something had to trigger it. Something had to trigger it. And this, what Binyamin said, triggered the compassion, and he started crying. And it was about not his brothers, but Achiv, Binyamin. Binyamin was his total full brother, not a half a brother, obviously, but especially this experience, the way he saw, the way his brother named all of his 10 sons after him, the attachment that Binyamin had to Yosef was beyond anything Yosef could have prepared himself for and predicted and thought about. And this caused him to lose control and to want to cry. Now, what does it mean when we say nichmeru? And this is what I'm going to explain, really what means rachmav. Pasuk says nichmeru rachmav, and Rashi says that rachmav, what does it mean nichmeru? That it's chamamu, had been heated. And over here, for the first time, something was answered that I had a question for many, many years. Usually in Chassidus, when it talks about, we have chesed, we have gvura, and we have teferes. Chesed is kindness. Gvura is these 3 attributes. Chesed is kindness, gvura is severity, and chesed, gvura, teferes, which is rachmanis, is mercy. And usually the way it's explained is that chesed means a person who has a nature, he's a do-gooder, he's a generous person, he's full of generosity, he sees a person who's suffering, he automatically, knee-jerk reaction, gives. So chesed is always giving. Gvura means you're judgmental and you're critical. Is he worthy of receiving this person who's asking for money, who needs help? Maybe it's his own fault. Is he worthy that I should give him a donation? Does he deserve it? That's gvura, so it's judgment. And then comes rachmim, which is they have mercy, which Chassidus explains in many places. It means the difference between chesed and rachmim is that chesed means you give in a knee-jerk reaction way automatically because you're a nice person. Rachmim means you taka no, he doesn't deserve it, but still, nevertheless, you give it. So usually it's explained that the reason why rachmim is better than chesed is because the person's acting in a way which is the brain is involved also, the discernment and discretion. So therefore, you're not going to do something like which is going to be extreme or fanatical, which might be in a person who's completely chesed. For example, the analogy of the kid, your child found a knife and it's a shiny toy. You're so full of chesed, you're the father, that it hurts you to be able to take away the knife from him and cause your child to cry. Just give me an example. So chesed might cause that a person might be too loose, no restrictions, no boundaries, and therefore something damaging or detrimental can come out of it. But rachamim means that you know the person is not deserving, still you decide to give. That's the way it's usually explained. So therefore it's a combination, has an aspect of chesed in it and an aspect of good in it. Now what I always had a question, which I did not understand until today, was that, come on, in the end, rachmim, why is rachmim called the combination, the middle, emtsoi, between the intermediate between chesed and gvura? It's much more chesed because in the end you give. So just because this time you know that he's unworthy, but how do we? It's much closer seemingly to chesed than it is to gvura. This always bothered me. But in this sikha, the Rebbe says something so phenomenal, and the truth is it really comes from this pasuk. You could say that we really have the true definition of Rachmanis and the true definition of being merciful. Listen to the words of the Rebbe. This is in Likutei Sichos, volume 15, page 357. He says, Midas HaChesed mitzad atzma is mashpia tev v'chesed v'ara miteva tev lehetiv. Chesed gives because that's the nature of chesed, to give, kindness. But still, the ashpah is bekrirus. It's giving and you're cold. Because you're not really experiencing the other person's situation, the other person's condition. It didn't touch you deeply. You're by nature a kind person, you automatically give. It's not a very emotional experience. Dagegen Gvura is the name for chmimus. Gvura means hot, heat. Unish be'esh, a fiery flame. The fire comes from them kas and reges. That's where you get anger. Someone's called a hothead. Because he gets very angry. He's hot-headed. Midas ha-rachmanis ha-berchosh tazirin is teva chesed. So rachmanis, mercy means, even though it's goodness and kindness, kumen in here too, dichmimus from midas gvura. But it has in it, imagine we're making the formula of what is rachmim, what is teferes, what is rachmanis. There's an injection of gvura in there. And what is it? The warmth, the heat, the fire of gvura. It's not a fire of explosive. It's something which represents something intense, something deep, something powerful. That's what it means that it's heated. Because he sees the pain of the other person, is yachim levavi b'chmimus shbe'esh. He starts getting stirred, but he's getting upset about it in a real way. When his Messiah berachmanis auf den Zweiten, he's aroused with the mercy over the other person. But das is goyim hashpa'as hachesed mit achmimus. This causes that the kindness should come with a warmth and a heat, mit a starker Chanukah, with a greater yearning, wie chesed allein than chesed itself. Und the far. That's what the Rebbe says, and therefore is rachmim al-mutzat zwischen chesed and gvura, while it is koil beide. Now we understand why rachmim is really a mamutza and emtzoi between chesed and gvura, because it actually has ingredients of gvura in it, in a real way, and that's the heat, the hotness of gvura is in the act, in the attribute of rachmim. Now maybe you could say, and this is very important to me, and I believe to you, you could say maybe the difference in chesed and teferes is the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy means you see somebody that's lacking, so therefore where there's a void, where there's a lacking, you give. You feel bad for the person. That's sympathy. But the feeling is not so intense to actually a visceral feeling. You feel the other person's pain. You feel the other person's what he's missing in life. You feel it. And that's what empathy is. Empathy is much more powerful. It's much more deep. And it's much more intense. That's the difference between empathy and sympathy. Now again, it doesn't mean explosive, like fireworks. Usually when you say a hothead, there was an eruption of anger. No. Over here it means a heat that's connected to how deep it is. How you feel it. You know, sometimes a person could go through an experience and it just changes you forever, but it doesn't mean somebody from the outside could tell. It just touched you very, very deep. It touched the core of your being, and therefore you react a certain way. And that's what it means, rachmanis. And this gives us such an amazing, amazing definition from this pasuk, where the pasuk says nichmeru rachmav. Rachmav has an element of nichmeru, that it's heated up, and this is what it means that yidna rachmanim baishanim and geim lechasadim. We have rachmanim. We have mercy, and that's a Jewish trait, but it means empathy, and that's why it's different than geim lechasadim. Geim lechasadim, we do acts of kindness, which could come from chesed, but rachmanim is a much deeper, more intense and powerful feeling, where it's empathy, not only sympathy. Now, what does Rashi say afterwards? Let's connect it to Chanukah. Rashi says afterwards, we mentioned this already before, and he says, Nischamu, when he brings an example from the koimer of olives, as we mentioned before, that, I'll say it again, a koimer is a vessel in which olives are placed so they should become softened by heating, thus facilitating the production of oil. How is this connected to Chanukah? Because really in that sikha, the Rebbe doesn't talk so much about the idea of Rachmanis as in interpersonal relationships, but he's talking about an Avodas Hashem. And what is that in Avodas Hashem? The Avodah of merirus, melancholy. Chassidus discusses very much the difference between depression, that's atzvus, and the feeling of merirus, which is melancholy. And one is good, as the Rebbe Marash said, there's nothing as whole and complete as a broken heart. A broken heart means that a person has regret, but the whole thing is based on changing. A person wants to change direction, so he has to first feel a certain sense of bitterness about how what he did before was not good. And the more he feels regret, this is a positive thing, the more he feels regret about his past, the more he's going to correct the future that such a thing shouldn't happen. And that's what they say, the beautiful expression, thank God for dissatisfaction. Because if not for dissatisfaction, many things would never happen. So it's good when a person has that feeling of dissatisfaction because it spurs him on. It becomes a catalyst, a springboard for great development. And this is what it means in Avodas Hashem. Over here, there's a level of Yosef. Yosef is a higher level of your soul. Then there's a level of Binyamin, Ben Oini, which means the son of my sorrows, because after he was born, Rachel passes away, so it's a lower level. Yosef is the superstar, the higher level, Etzem Hashem, which is not affected at all by anything going on in the world. Binyamin is a lower level of the soul, which is affected. So you have to feel a sense of merirus, that you came from the highest of the greatest heights, and you're involved in stupidities, in petty trivialities of this world. Relative to what you should be doing, you are wasting time. Let's say, this is what it means in Avodah, the Avodah of merirus. And we say that it's only with this feeling of merirus, then you come to the real simcha, then you come to the real growth. This the Alter Rebbe also makes clear in chapter 26 on the pasuk, B'chol otzev yeh moiseh. In every single sense of dissatisfaction, yeh moiseh, we come to a profit, we come to true joy. So this is a good thing. And this is what the Rebbe explains in the Sikha in Chelik Tezvav, how it is in Avodas Hashem. And this is what it means, and now the connection between the Parsha and Chanukah, and the idea of warmth. First of all, even though most of the time the lesson of Chanukah is the idea that you have to kindle the light for the outside, but everyone knows the famous word of the Rebbe Marash, where he said we have to listen to the tale of what the candles are telling us. Which means, first of all, there's a lesson in the idea of oil. Oil produces the flame. So, and what is oil? Oil, he says, is a time when it has to get heated up in order to produce the oil. And what does heated up mean over here? In our case, heat means connected to gvura, connected to the idea of a bitterness which touches you to your core. A real dissatisfaction. A real dissatisfaction will cause you to change. Every single change of direction, every single change of growth has to have that mode of merirus, similar to what it says in other places about zayis, kishakaychin, I'd say, maitzi shamnei. Only the olive which is crushed releases the oil. There's a stage where we have an olive, you can eat them, but there's a stage, and by the way, the Rebbe said in the Sikha, olives are bitter, but there's a stage where you crush them, then they can be used as oil. And the whole point of that vort is that when it's being crushed, it's in between the stage of being able to eat it as an olive, and we still don't have the oil. But only through crushing them, then we get to the oil. Same thing's over here. Only when we put the olives in that vessel, which causes them to heat up. Then the oil comes out. When they're in that vessel, we can't eat them as olives. It's a process that they have to go through. And then we get to the oil. That's exactly what Rashi brings over there. So the same thing is over here. This is the message of the candle lighting. We're looking at the flames. Number one, we have to understand there's a process. How do we get to the flame? There's an idea of merirus. There's an idea of being serious, of introspection, but with a positive approach. That's another thing that Alter Rebbe says about the verse. B'chol otzev yeh moiser. The whole idea of melancholy, dissatisfaction is a means to an end. B'chol otzev yeh moiser. We get an advantage. There will come an advantage. There will come a profit when you go through this period, similar to stock taking. The real objective is profit, growth, productivity. But in order to come to real productivity, growth, development, we have to go through this stage of the heat, of the intense experience of really letting something touch you to the core, empathy to yourself, to your situation, to your descent, to how much you know your potential is really unbelievable, and you measure that up to what you want to do. Like, for example, they say all champions, all winners, all champions, how do they become what they become? They don't measure their standard to anyone else. They're always trying to beat their own previous record. They have this level of dissatisfaction, but it's all with a positive twist. That level of dissatisfaction is all there in order to be able to grow higher and stronger and better and deeper and greater. And then we have the idea of the warmth. Azumadike Chanukah. It means in general warmth. The idea of warmth, a chosed is a flam fire, it says a chosed is a fiery flame. And like it's explained all over, the idea of warmth. The opposite of apathy, the opposite of indifference. The opposite of coldness. As Chassidus explains in many places, what a molek is. You're as cold as ice. And we have to melt the ice and make a fire. But based on today's shir and the sikh over there, it's a whole new meaning of warmth. There's warmth in being warm, but there's also warmth to experience someone else's pain in a way of rachmanis, nichmeru rachmav, which means neschamamu, that it was heated. So that means in general, there's not only just plain warmth. We're talking about the warmth connected to Rachmanis. A Jew by nature has this ability that he should have deep felt experiences. And when he has a deep felt experience, then it's going to be much more different, greater. Which means obviously, in a way, that the whole point of Rachamim and Chesed, besides everything we just explained, one is sympathy, one is empathy, it means obviously that the giving will be a whole different sort of giving. When you're giving out of sympathy, it'll be less than if you're giving out of empathy. When you're giving out of sympathy, there could still be the feeling, I'm the giver, he's the receiver, I'm higher, he's lower. But if the giving is coming out of empathy, why do I deserve more than him? You feel his troubles. You understand? And you make it your life. So the Eibusher should help that if we see in ourselves how much the Eibusher sees how much we are warm and that we are full of empathy, which is so important in our relationship with everybody else. So Midah connected Midah, the Eibusher will have Rachmanis on us. As we all know in Avodas Hashem, this whole concept of being Ma'oire Rachmam Rabim. We have to arouse Rachmam Rabim, great mercies. And Midah connected Midah, when we practice Rachmim, Yisrael Rachmanim, so that will be Ma'oire Hashem's Rachmam Rabim, and it will give every single one of us a lichtige Chanukah, a varme Chanukah. Every single one of us should be blessed with lots and lots and lots of Chanukah guilt, with all interpretations, which means gesund, gesund, gesund. And also, we should have nachas from ourselves and from our family. And we should have lots of geld, money, kipshute, to be able to do unlimited maisim tovim, acts of chesed and kindness, and acts of mercy. And the main geld, which is the Gula Mitzvah Shlema, the redemption. The Gula Mitzvah Shlema, take of me ad mamish. Posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne.